ॐ नमो नारायणाय ॐ नमो नारायणाय
Asmat Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Paramagurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Sarvagurubhyo Namaha. So this is our part 2 of Vedartha Sangraha by Ramanuja. We were only up into the introduction, so we were talking about Advaita Vedanta. So we ended last session speaking about the idea in Advaita Vedanta, the Vedanta of monism or Shankara's Vedanta. The idea that there are 3 levels of a reality. So let's have a look at the text, and we can just examine that. So one, it says here, one is transient or temporary appearance of existence. So that is called by the Advaitin pratibhasika satta. All of these are called satta. Satta means reality, means eternal, whatever. So we can just call them paritibhasika, vyavaharika, and paramartika. And usually we only talk about vyavaharika and paramartika, but here he's included pratibhasika. Pratibhasika is the very temporary illusion that we have, and the example given is when we see a rope in a dark room, we think that it's a snake or a serpent. Okay, so one is transient or temporary appearance and existence, paritibhasika satta. Like that of the serpent, which appears in the rope as an illusion. In a few moments, that illusion, or the illusion of the snake, it disappears, and when we turn on the light, and as it is termed, is sublated by true knowledge. So it's overcome by true knowledge when we actually perceive the rope as it is. So it is real for all. It is real for all practical purposes. Vyavaharika satta. Okay, sorry. Far higher and superior is the existence of this world and all that it contains. So that is real for all practical purposes. Whereas so to give an example, the reality of the snake is not real for practical purposes, right? Because if we try to infer something because we see a snake, that's not real. So whereas this world, the reality of this world is called vyavaharika satta. Vyavaharika means, here he's saying it's real for practical purposes, whatever that means to the Advaitin. Anyway, this existence persists as long as the jivatman, the soul, is in bondage of samsara, is covered by avidya, ignorance, or maya, illusion. But when the atma, or the soul, attains release or mukti, right, liberation from samsara, the world disappears like any other illusion, and the pure Atman shines alone and without a second. Okay, so this Atma, which is the same as Brahman, is the only true reality, and that is called Paramatika Satta. So what is Paramatika? Paramatika, according to the Advaitins, is the only reality. These other two, Pratibhashika and Vyavaharika, these are illusions. But for practical purposes, Vyavaharika is what we can give an example. For example, the world is a globe. The world is a globe, but when we look out of our window, it looks like it's a plane. It looks like it's flat. So from our point of view down here, it looks like it's flat. If we go up very high in a spaceship or in a balloon, if we go up really high, then we can see the curvature of the Earth, and we realize that it's not flat. It's actually a globe, like that. So from our vision down here, we don't realize that the world is a globe, and when we go up, we see that it's a globe. So this is just one example of different realities in the way that we perceive them. So our perception right now is different from our perception if we go up higher, in that analogy. So that's sort of an analogy to explain Vyavaharika and Paramartika views. All right, so here we're still explaining the Kevala Dvaita, or the monistic, or some people call Mayavada philosophy of Shankara. So there are some schools of Advaitins. So there's different schools of Advaitins. Shankara's is called sometimes Kevala Dvaita because it's perhaps the starkest or the most monistic, the most into oneness, the most school which is mostly into oneness in every sense. And we're going to come across some other ones, but let's talk about this. In some schools of Advaitins, there are some schools of Advaitins that hold also that there is only one jiva in samsara. So ultimately, according to the Advaitins, in the Paramatic view, in the topmost view, the highest view, the view beyond all illusion and all ignorance, right? Everything is one, and there's only one Brahman. But if they were to accept the idea that there is some sort of reality of a jiva in a vyavaharika sense, not in a paramartika sense, in a lower sense, the lower reality, then some schools of Advaitins say, okay, in that lower sense of reality, there is a jiva, but there's only one. There's only one jiva. So there are some schools that believe that that in the lower sense of reality, there appear to be many jivas, and others say that there's only one jiva. So that is called Eka Jivavad. So namely the speaker or thinker himself and all other sentient beings, jivas, which appear to exist, are as unreal as the non-sentient things. Okay, so in the Paramatic, of course, all of the Advaita schools believe in the ultimate reality is that everything is one, everything is Brahman. And therefore, all these appearances of difference are unreal. But there's different schools. And he's just pointing out that there's this different school. This view is called Eka Jiva Vada, and Sri Ramanuja makes a reference to it while refuting Advaita in general. So he's Ramanuja is refuting all schools of Advaita, all schools of non-dualism, all schools of monism. So it was stated before that Advaitins consider the Shastra, and particularly the Shruti, the Vedas, the Upanishads, as a more reliable authority or pramana. Pramana means a method of proof or a tool of knowledge, of right knowledge, a pramana. And we have those three pramanas that we follow, pratyaksha, anumana, and shabda, basically. Pratyaksha means sense perception, anumana, inference, logical inference, and shabda, as it's stated here, the Shastra or the Shruti, the Vedas. Shabda really means just sound, and it refers to an authoritative statement. So a statement by someone who's authoritative. So somebody who's authentic and somebody who's reliable. So reliable authority or pramana, that then pratyaksha or sense perception. So the Advaitins agree. They agree that what you see is not what you should believe, but what you read in the Shastra, especially in the Upanishads, should be what you believe. So this statement has now to be qualified and clarified. So let's understand exactly what they mean by the Shastra being a more reliable authority than what we see or feel or touch with our senses, our material senses. This statement has to be qualified and clarified. So there is one form of pratyaksha which they look at as a reliable source of knowledge. Okay, so Advaitins accept one form of pratyaksha. Take the case of a pot in front of us. So we have a clay pot in front of us. Even before we perceive the pot as a pot, right? Even before we recognize that it's a pot, right? We perceive, says the Advaitin, that there is an existence there. There's something existing there, or sat, and what corresponds to it is, right? So that there is something there, even before we recognize it actually as a pot. We may see a shape. Again, if it's a little dark and our eyes can't exactly focus on it, we don't know that it's a pot, but we see a shape. Okay, so even before we perceive the pot as a pot, we perceive, says the Advaita, that there's an existence of sat, or what corresponds to it, right? Asti, is. So at the very first instance, the moment, kshana, the word kshana means a blink of an eye or a momentary the first moment, just in a flash of sight. As soon as we open the door, we see in the half darkness, we see a shape and we get this perception. But the perception, our mind hasn't immediately said, oh, this is a pot. Immediately, we haven't recognized it. But before that, so momentarily, what pratyaksha reveals is what that there's a being there, or mere existence. So the existence of something there, a shape, is understood by us immediately. What exactly that shape is, we haven't recognized yet in the first instance, right? So, and in the perceptions that follow in later instance, right, the pot appears illusory on the ears, and we say there is a pot. Okay, so after that, it's revealed to us that this is a pot. First of all, we see it, and instantaneously we think, oh, there's something there, and then we understand, we recognize it to be a pot, right? So there's these two perceptions, is what they're saying. There's one perception, an intermediate, a primary perception, then a secondary perception, like that. So the second, or the latter perception, is illusory and presents differentiating features, like the quality of being a pot or others different, beta, which mark it off from, say, a cloth, when the pot is taken away and a cloth is seen in its place. Okay, so anyway, so when the pot is taken away and a cloth is seen in its place, the perception of the cloth is superimposed on bare existence, right? So first of all, we see a shape instantly. We see a shape instantly, and that is, we realize that there is a reality there. There is something which is real there. Then we recognize it to be a pot, and then after that, if the pot is taken away and a cloth comes there, we again have the same sort of perception, primary perception and secondary perception. The perception of the cloth is superimposed on bare existence. When we take the pot away, all of a sudden there's nothing there. So there's bare existence, and then the cloth is put there. So namely the is spoken of before, and latter still, other things like chair, table, pen, etc., are superimposed illusorily on it. The one permanent feature that persists throughout and forever is the being. There's something there. Or the bare existence. There's bare existence, or sat, and the other perceptions of pot, cloth, table, chair, pen, etc., and the like supersede one another without persistence, right? But they don't persist. So what he's saying is that the mere persistence of reality in general, that first perception, exists always, and therefore we can say that is real. So, but the other perceptions, when we start to look and see what reality is, and we define it as a particular thing, either a pot or a chair or a pen or a table or a cloth, right? Then that is illusory. So this bare existence, or sat, is alone real, being persistent, because we're always constantly with our senses realizing that there is a reality. So the bare existence of sat is alone real, being persistent. The temporary appearances such as pot, cloth, etc., are unreal because they're illusory or they're temporary. The first instance perception, which does not present differing features, is what is called nirvikalpaka pratyaksha. Okay, so this is the technical jargon, the technical term in Sanskrit philosophy of the type of pratyaksha that the Advaitins accept. The type of that primary type of pratyaksha, the understanding that there is a reality, but not distinguishing what type of reality it actually is sort of a plain type of reality that is called nirvikalpa pratyaksha. Nirvikalpa pratyaksha, right? Nir means without. Vikalpa, we could look it up and see what it means. Nirvikalpa means without differentiation, I think is how we could describe nirvikalpa. So perception of something without judging it, without recognizing it, without saying that it's this or that, just realizing that it exists, its existence. That is nirvikalpika pratyakša. And it's a source of true knowledge, according to the Advaitins. The latter perceptions later on, when we see that it's a table or a cloth or a pen or a what was the first thing? A pot, right? Then when we distinguish what it is, that is called savikalpaka or savikalpa pratyaksha. Savikalpa pratyaksha. So nirvikalpa pratyaksha and savikalpa pratyaksha. Okay, so that is considered illusory. And the latter perceptions presenting differentiating features are called savikalpaka pratyaksha and are illusory. What persists forever is alone true, according to the Advaitins, and real. And this is one of the fundamental doctrines of Advaita. So that is, whatever is temporary or transient is unreal or illusory. When the Advaitin claims greater authority for Shastra or Shruti, right, the Vedas, the Upanishadic statements, so other students of Vedanta are tempted to ask the Advaitin, according to your doctrine, everything other than Brahman is false or illusory. Well, that would mean that the Shruti, the Upanishads, the Upanishadic statements are also, the Veda itself is also illusory and false because it's not Brahman, it's something different. So it also is false. How then could the Shruti or the Veda, which you say is false, right, ultimately, which is itself false, give true knowledge, such as Brahman alone being real, the identity between Jivatman and Brahman, and the like, all these different truths which you talk about, and you say that they're gotten by use of the scriptures, by reading the scriptures or studying the scriptures, especially the Upanishads. Is it not the knowledge given by an illusory or tainted source likely to be false also? In other words, you're saying, okay, the Advaitin is saying, study the Upanishads, study the Vedanta Shastras, and you will understand the philosophy of Vedanta from the scriptures, and then you will understand that there is only one thing, Brahman. But then if the scriptures are false themselves, how does studying a false thing give us a truth? That's the real point. That's the point that this person is asking the Advaitin. So what the answer to this, the Advaitin replies as follows. Sometimes information coming from an illusory source may be true or give knowledge of the truth. Okay, so he has to give us an example of that. Those who have made a special study of the science of dreams, this is his analogy, say, for example, that if one dreams of a man with black teeth, one's death will soon follow. So this is in Jyotish Shastra, the science of astrology and astronomy, right, in the Vedas, right? There's a thing called omens, Varshapala, the fruit of observing something, even if it's a dream, right? So in the science of dreams, if you dream about somebody with black teeth, then that's supposed to be portending your future death. Your death will come, right? It's some sort of omen of the future. Such prognostications are afterwards found to be true. Okay, so he's saying, and whether you believe it or not, he is saying, he's giving this example, obviously at the time that he wrote this or something, and people believe that, or some people may believe this, that if you have a certain dream, then you probably will die soon, right? So such prognostications are afterwards found to be true. The dream, however, is unreal. So there may be other things that people have seen in dreams or seen in, and anyway, this is, I find this to be sort of a weird example. But anyway, this is the example that he says the Advaitin will give an example like this of getting truth from the Vedas, even though they consider ultimately the Vedas to be false or illusion. So a further question might be asked: if Shruti or Shastra destroys all illusions and reveals only the only reality, Brahman, what about the Shruti itself? Is there anything else which destroys Shruti? Is there anything else that destroys Shruti, which itself is also an illusion? The Advaitin answers, the fire in a forest burns away all the trees, creepers, bushes, and the like, and when they're all burnt away, the fire is consumed of itself and perishes without any other agency causing its destruction. So if we compare this fire to the scriptures, so the fire burns up the wood, and once all the fuel is gone, the fire itself is extinguished. So the Veda helps us to, with its knowledge, which is illusory, actually in reality, helps us to understand the truth. And when we have understood the truth, then the Veda itself also disappears. This is the idea of the Advaitins. Okay, so if, according to Advaita, the only reality is Brahman, and if Brahman has no attributes, no activities, no parts, no desires, no knowledge, and no will, one might ask, is there no place in the Advaitic scheme, in the Advaitic philosophy, Shankara's philosophy, for a personal God of religion who is omniscient, all-knowing, omnipotent, all-powerful, and full of compassion for all the beings created by him, and who is worshipped with love and devotion for the sake of his grace and for final salvation or liberation? And amazingly, when you ask this to Advaitins, they'll say, the Advaitin says in reply, yes, there is. There's a place for such a God. The only reality is, of course, Brahman, according to the Advaitin. But as stated before, this Brahman, which is without form, without color, without attributes, and in other words, without differentiating features of any kind, right, becomes associated somehow, he says somehow, right? Let's talk about that later. Somehow with a factor which obscures it or shadows it, which is called Maya or avidya, illusion or ignorance. When Brahman is shadowed by Maya, then Saguna Brahman, no, this ultimate Brahman of the Advaitins is called Nirguna Brahman. The word guna means, we like to say the word guna means a mode of nature, like that. Guna means a quality. So nirguna means without any qualities whatsoever. It has no qualities whatsoever. It doesn't even have the quality of having no qualities. Right? Okay, which is an impossibility. If of course, we have many logical arguments about this, but it cannot really be conceived of, because if we say that there's a thing which has no qualities whatsoever, then we say it has the quality of having no qualities. So again, it's impossible to conceive of with our minds logically an entity or an item or an element or a principle that has no qualities. So anyhow, but the Advaitins call it Nirguna Brahman. They call it Brahman, or the Supreme, without any qualities, qualityless. It's indistinguishable, right? So when Brahman is shadowed by Maya, then they call it Saguna, with qualities, Brahman with qualities. And that Brahman with qualities, or Saguna Brahman, is distinguished from Nirguna Brahman because it's actually an illusion. And they call it by different names: Ganesh, Shiva, Vishnu, Surya, Devi, right? Some people Kartikeya, like that. They say that all of these are, or even the Atman itself, the individual soul, they say all of these things are actually Brahman, and but they appear to have qualities, and therefore they don't call them Nirguna Brahman. They call them without qualities, Brahman without qualities, but they call them Saguna Brahman. Sa means with. So Brahman with qualities. Another name for Saguna Brahman in philosophy here is Ishvara. Ishvara means the Lord. Ishvara can refer to Shiva, to Brahma, to anybody you say. Ishvara, the controller, who's in charge. But Ishvara is the Saguna Brahman, the Brahman with qualities, right? So when Brahman is shadowed by Maya, Saguna Brahman, or Ishvara, or the personal God of religion with attributes like omniscience and omnipotence, results. And it is he that is the cause, maintenance, and destruction of the world appearance, right? They don't call it a real world. They call it an appearance of the world because they believe it's false. And that is the object of veneration and worship. right? So according to the Advaitins, if we do any type of worship, we should worship this Ishvara. We should worship this Saguna Brahman, the Brahman with qualities like that. So, but as Saguna Brahman results from Maya, he is unreal, as the Jivatma shadowed by a same principle, which in the case of the Jiva is usually called avidya or ignorance or nescience. So just as we see that there's a soul, see that there's a universe, similarly, we see that there's a God, a Saguna Brahman, Ishvara, right, with different qualities. All of these are appearances and not reality, according to the Advaitins, and therefore we should understand them like that. So, but Maya and avidya are not essentially different. So ignorance and illusion are not essentially different. Illusion means simply a lack of full knowledge. So Saguna Brahman, or God, exists, of course, in a vyavaharika way, in a lower type of reality way, but not in the paramartika, in the ultimate reality. So but his existence is of the second order referred to, namely Vyavaharika Satyam. Right, there we go. That's what I said. So he is true for all practical purposes and may be adored or worshipped as long as the jiva, the jivatman, is in bondage in samsara due to avidya or ignorance, and may even be the means of the jiva proceeding thence to the realization of Brahman or mukti, liberation, which will be defined presently. So if we look in Bhagavad Gita or some other scriptures, it may say, worship the Supreme Lord. Krishna says, worship me. Manmana bhava madbhakto. Okay, so we can worship Krishna because Krishna is, according to the Advaitins, Krishna is a manifestation of the Saguna Brahman, Ishvara. So we can do that, and by following that worship, we'll become elevated, and we'll therefore understand the true reality from the scriptures, that ultimately it's all an illusion, and even Krishna is an illusion, and ultimately everything is just Brahman, and that we're also Brahman, like that. Okay, so that's the idea. That's the idea of the Advaitins. So now proceeding thence to the realization of Brahman or liberation, mukti, which will be defined presently. Saguna Brahman, or Ishvara, or God, right, with the qualities, disassociated from Maya. If we disassociate God from Maya, is identical with the jiva disassociated with avidya or ignorance. Or such disassociation would simply mean that both of these are understood to be pure Brahman, pure undifferentiated nirguna Brahman, without any qualities. So the student of Vedanta has one more doubt, which he would like to get cleared. He might ask the Advaitin, you say that Brahman is the only reality, and that there's no other reality at all. There's only Brahman, and Brahman has no qualities. It's nirguna. This is what we're talking about, and that is the true reality, because even this Ishvara, who is the Saguna Brahman, who has got qualities and appears to be God, even that one is ultimately unreal. Just like the jiva is unreal, the universe is unreal, everything is unreal. So the only reality is that one thing, Brahman, which is undifferentiated and has no qualities. Okay, so the student again says to the questioner, again asks the Advaitin, right? You say that that's the only reality, is Nirguna Brahman, and that other than that, there's no other reality at all. But from what you have said just now, it appears that there's one more principle. There's another principle than Brahman. You talked about Brahman being the only principle, the only thing. Now, it appears there's another one, another principle, another tattva or reality named Maya or Avidya. By the association with Brahman, by its association with Brahman, it causes the illusion of God and the world of sentient and non-sentient beings. Right? So that's a very good question, right? So if this is so, would there not be two reals, Brahman and this Avidya or Maya? That Maya also has to be real, because otherwise, if it's not real, how did it affect Brahman? How did it make Brahman into Ishvara, Saguna Brahman, the world, the universe, and the souls? How did it do that? Right? Okay, so in a minute, we'll talk about what the reply is from the Advaitin. Let's see. What's the question? Why the ordinary jiva in the material world can't be accepted as Saguna Brahman? Yes, why not? The ordinary jiva in the world. But we don't usually refer to, yes, of course, the jiva also has in this world, according to their philosophy, if we're all Brahman. Yes, yes, I agree. It can also be, we can also say we are, if we're Advaitins, if we're Mayavadis, we can say that we are Brahman. That's the meaning in the Upanishads of the phrase Aham Brahmasmi, according to them. According to them, they say Aham Brahmasmi. Asmi means I am. Aham means I. Brahman. I am Brahman. That's what it means, literally, Aham Brahmasmi. So if we find that in the Upanishads and we say, oh, I'm Brahman. I am Brahman, right? So the world is Brahman. I am Brahman. Brahman is Brahman. God is Brahman, right? In all of his forms, all of his saguna forms, he is Brahman. So everything's Brahman, correct? Right. So we can say that he's simply saying that everybody talks about the jiva and Ishvara. They talk about jiva, Ishvara, and the world, Chida, and Ishvara. They talk about these three realities, these three principles, but ultimately they say all of them are one thing, Brahman, like that. So when the only two of them have consciousness, and that is the jivas and God. So the world is sort of unconscious, insentient. So it's difficult to understand how something which is insentient could be covered by ignorance or illusion. I mean, how does a rock have illusion if it's not sentient, right? So what he's done for this conversation, the Advaitin and the other person who's talking, they're talking about the soul, and they're talking about the God mostly because they're perceived by everybody to be sentient, to have knowledge. So, okay, so this is a question. This is a question put to the Advaitin. The Advaitin has a ready answer. No, he says no. Avidya or ignorance or Maya, right, has no real existence and is not real. So he says avidya is not real. He's determined to say that only Brahman is real and avidya or ignorance is not real. What then is avidya, one may ask? The Advaitin says avidya is not sat, it is not eternally existing, right? Because if avidya or ignorance were eternally existing, then that means that we would never attain liberation, because only according to the Advaitins, the only liberation comes about with the knowledge of reality, and with full knowledge, liberation comes about. Jnanat mokshaha, from knowledge comes liberation, right? But if there's ignorance, there can't be any liberation. So if ignorance is eternal, there can't be any liberation, right? So it's a problem for the Advaitins, right? So avidya or ignorance or Maya is not sat or eternal, or a really existing thing, which is Brahman alone, nor can it be said to be non-existent. Okay, so the Advaitin says it doesn't exist, it's not real. But he also has to admit that it must have some reality because it does affect Brahman, right? So he is forced to say, this is where Advaita philosophy becomes very problematic, is they're forced to say that it's neither real nor unreal. It's not real, but it's also not unreal. We never heard of such a thing, and such a thing can't really be understood logically. It's against logic, right? So, okay. So avidya is not sat, or a really existing thing, which Brahman alone, nor can it be said to be non-existent, like the horn of a hare. A hare is a rabbit, and rabbit doesn't have a horn. So if you say a rabbit's horn, it doesn't mean anything because no rabbits have horns, right? So this is a saying in English and in a horn of a hare or a flower. It's also in Sanskrit. In Sanskrit, there's some sayings like this: pushpa, akasha pushpa, flower in the sky, in Sanskrit. So flower has to be in the dirt, or it has to be at least in the water, in the dirt, in the form a lotus is in the water, but it's whatever. It has to be down on the ground. And flowers cannot grow in the sky. So if you say a horn of a hare or a flower in the sky, it means something that doesn't exist, like a unicorn doesn't exist, right? So which does not exist at all, right? So avidya or ignorance is not asat. Avidya, ignorance, or maya, illusion, is not asat, is not unreal. It's not a non-existing thing. That's what the Advaitin is saying. It's not a non-existing thing, but it's also not real. So he's saying it's neither real nor unreal. This is very contradictory. So the student may find this curious and contradictory, let's say, and ask himself how a thing can be neither sat, real, nor asat, unreal, neither true nor untrue. The Advaitin's explanation is as follows. He explains, okay, so how can Maya or Avidya be neither real nor unreal? So here's what the Advaitin will say. Avidya, or ignorance, or Maya, is a thing that exists for all practical purposes. It exists for practical purposes. Remember that in the Vyavaharika level, the Advaitin believes in these different levels. And I told you the Pratibhasika level, which is complete illusion or very temporary illusion, he doesn't talk about that much. He talks about the Vyavaharika level and the Paramartika level. These two levels of existence are understood by him. The lower level of reality or existence, right, is illusion according to him, but it is practical. It is for practical purposes. It's understood to be somewhat real. Okay, so the Advaitin's explanation is as follows. Avidya is a thing that exists for all practical purposes, but may sometime or other cease to exist. At the time of liberation, it has to cease to exist, right? So its existence is something peculiar. It is different from both the real and true on one side, and the unreal and the non-existence on the other side. The other thing which is completely unreal, like the horn of the hare. So it's different from the flower in the sky or the horn of the hare or the unicorn. It's different from that because it's not that it just doesn't exist, but it also exists in a Vyavaharika sense, in the Vyavaharika plane of existence, in the lower level of reality, according to the Advaitins. It exists, but that level is also illusion, so ultimately it doesn't exist. So it has some existence, but not true existence. Anyway, this is their idea. So its existence is something peculiar. It's different from both the real and the true on one side, and the untrue and the non-existence on the other side, like the horn of a hare. As an instance of this peculiar existence, which can be defined neither as sat, real, or asat, unreal, and which has to be called an indefinable kind of existence, So if I say, okay, that something cannot be defined, when we define things by using words, right, to describe them, right? And so if something is indescribable, then in Sanskrit we call it anivachaniya. The word vach means to speak or to say. So what is vachaniya? What is vachana or vachaniya is something that we can speak about, we can describe. But what is anivachaniya is something which cannot be described by words. So anivachaniya means that it's indefinable. It's an indefinable type of existence. Brahman has an indefinable type of existence. This is what the Advaitins say. We may take the mirage that is seen by travelers in hot countries. Okay, so here's an example that they give. So there's a mirage, right? A mirage means we're in the desert, we're in a hot country, and somehow the heat waves in the sky seem to make a pattern in front of our eyes. It looks like there's water. It looks like that there's water there. There's no water. It's a desert. But the thirsty person begins to have this illusion, and he sees the patterns of the heat, and he sees that there's some water there. But when he actually comes close, and from a different point of view, from a different angle of view or a higher level, he sees that water, what looked like water to him, was just a mirage. It was an illusion. It didn't actually exist. There is no water there. So sometimes something like a pond that appears to a weary traveler. So if you have this is what he's saying. If you have a thirsty person in the desert, he sees this mirage and he sees a pond of water. He thinks that there's water there, but it's not really. It's really a trick of the eyes. It's an illusion. So the images of trees and other objects are seen in the water as it seems to be of that pond. So images of trees and other objects might be seen in water also. That's also somewhat illusory too. Like, so if we look in water, it seems to be like a mirror. So even when we look in a mirror, we see reflection in the mirror. That reflection is not us. When we look in the pond and we see the trees reflected into the pond, right? Or if we see a beautiful ocean with a mountain in the background, the mountain is reflected into calm water, and it looks like there's a mountain in the sea. There's no mountain in the sea. It's just a reflection. So a reflection can have it has some reality, but ultimately when the wind comes and disturbs the water, then the reflection goes like that. Or if we have dust on the mirror, we can't see ourselves like that. So and for all practical purposes, that reflection of us in the mirror, which is called bimba pratibimba. Pratibimba means a reflection of the bimba, the form, right? Bimba and the pratibimba. So there's the form, and then when we look in the mirror, there's the reflection. That reflection doesn't have any practical use. We can't feed it, we can't dress it. We can only do practical things with our form, with our actual form, with the reality. That has limited reality, that reflection. So the images of the images of trees and other objects as seen in the water, as it seems to be of that pond. He proceeds thither, the weary, thirsty person, to the mirage, and perhaps with the object of quenching his thirst. But when he actually comes to the spot, there's neither a pond nor water. The mirage existed and was seen for some time. So one cannot say that it did not exist. It exists in a sense because he saw it, right? Just like we thought we saw a snake in a rope like that. So it's illusory. So it disappeared when the man came to the spot. So it cannot be called real. So it is neither real nor non-existent. It is neither real nor unreal. Avidya, or ignorance, now exists for us. Now we're in ignorance. We're not in full knowledge. But when we arrive at liberation or mukti, right, the release from bondage, right, it would cease to exist. Ignorance will cease to exist. We'll have full knowledge, and only Brahman will then remain, alone and without a second. Nirguna Brahman, right, without any undifferentiated Brahman. So the jiva will disappear, the world of illusion will disappear, God will disappear, the personal God, Saguna Brahman, that will all disappear at liberation, and everything will be just understood to be that one undifferentiated Nirguna Brahman without any qualities. Okay, so this is finally what the Advaitin says. It will be evident from what has been said that Advaita postulates two Brahmans. Two Brahmans. The higher Brahman, the Para Brahman, which is Nirguna, Niravayava, Nishkriya. Nishkriya means it doesn't do any action. Niravaya, it has no parts, it has no, without attributes, without parts, without activity, which can be called only pure consciousness. And then a lower or apara Brahman, which is also called Ishvara, the Saguna Brahman, which is omniscient, omnipotent, all-knowing, all-powerful, who creates the manifold world of appearances and sustains it. But this lower Brahman is unreal, being the effect of Maya. He exists, it is true, for all practical purposes, Vyavaharika Satyam, but would cease to exist after liberation, after mukti. Since Brahman alone is real according to Advaita, it follows that the individual self or jiva, to which class you and I and all other sentient beings belong, is also unreal. Okay, so let's see, is there a question here? Looks like Advaitins define all what is temporary as anivachaniya. Is that correct? It's not that the things that are temporary are anivachaniya. It's everything is anivachaniya. The difference, anything which is temporary is anivachaniya. Even Brahman in the ultimate sense is pretty much anivachaniya. You can't describe it because it has no qualities. So really, the Advaita philosophy is a lot of talk about nothing because they can't really describe what they're talking about fully. or even it becomes very partially problematic to even talk about it. So yes, you're right. You're exactly right. That that the world and the souls and everything ultimately is unreal, and therefore, but is also has some reality, and so therefore it also has to be understood as anivachaniya. Correct. Okay. So, but we should clearly discriminate what is unreal in the jiva from what is real, right? So there is some reality. There is some reality, and we should clearly distinguish what is completely unreal with what is real. Brahman, it has already been stated before, is pure consciousness or experience, which is conscious of nothing and experiences nothing. The jiva says, I see the pot. I know this is a pot, and so on. Here in I see and I know, there is an element calling itself I, right? And it looks on itself as a seer and one who does the act of seeing, and as a knower and one who does the act of knowing. This I, which is the knower, the doer, the one who sees, and so is superimposed illusory, in an illusory way, on pure consciousness or Brahman, which underlies the jiva and is the substratum of the knower, the seer, and the doer. This substrate is alone real. Only the thing underneath, the underlying principle is real, right? The idea of being a knower and being a seer and everything like that is unreal. And that which gives rise to the notion of I, of the knower, the seer, the doer, is illusory. Consciousness, which is pure, can have no such thing as the feeling or notion that I, or it's being a knower, a seer, or the like. So Atman, consciousness which is pure, can have no such thing as the feeling or notion of I-ness, right? Or it's being the knower, seer, or doer, and the like. So the Atman, the pure consciousness of the Atman, the Jivatman, on which these illusions appear, is alone real, and it is identical with the Supreme Brahman, with the Nirguna Brahman. It is no such thing as being a knower, a seer, a doer, and the like. These are unreal appearances and are of the nature of jada, or non-sentient things, insentient things, right? These are unreal appearances and are of the nature of jada. Jada usually means material things, okay? In dreamless sleep, the notion or feeling of I and of being a knower and a doer disappears in dreamless sleep. Remember, we're talking about these different states of sleep. So we have waking, we have sleeping. When we're sleeping, we have some dreams. When we still have some dreams, there's still some consciousness there of I. But when we're in very, very deep sleep or a coma, then there's no even perception of the self, right? Of being the knower, the doer, the dreamer, or whatever. So so that perception of I, of being the knower and the doer, disappears, and the pure consciousness or Brahman alone remains. Such will be the state of mukti also. So basically what the Advaitins are saying is total unconsciousness, deep unconsciousness, or a coma is basically liberation for them. That's their idea, that the liberation will be like that. There'll be no idea of separateness. There'll be no idea of differentiation. There'll be no attributes. There'll only just be the substance, Brahman, and that's it. There'll be no differentiating between you and the universe and God and Brahman. It'll just be Brahman. The Atman, or Brahman, or pure consciousness, or anubhuti, that has no qualities or relationships such as being a knower or doer. In every form of knowledge, such as I know the pot, there are three concepts. That is, that of the knower, I, that of the pot, right? which is the object of knowing, and the knowing itself. So in all perceptions, there's someone who perceives, there's something which is being perceived, and there's the act of actually perceiving that thing, right? So these three things occur in all things. There has to be a knower, what is known, and the act of knowing. So these three are illusory. What is true or real is mere consciousness, and this is Atman or Brahman, Nirguna Brahman, Paramartika Brahman, right? So this is the idea of the Advaitin. So now, okay, so that is the statement. What we just went through there, that is a statement by the Advaitin of what his philosophy is of the principle of Nirguna Brahman and how he understands it. Okay. Now, what is the goal, therefore? What is the goal? So remember, we're looking at Tattva, Hita, and Purushartha. We're looking at the what is the reality. So this is what the Advaitins or the Mayavadis, the monists say is reality. This is their understanding of reality that we've just explained. Now we're going to look at what the goal is then. Okay, so we know that according to them, this is their reality. So then what goal do they have? Let's understand their goal. What does liberation to them mean? And so when we understand that, then we'll look at the means for achieving that, their means for achieving that. So now we look at Purushartha. Purushartha means the goal. What is the goal of Advaita? So on the supreme goal of life in Advaita, because remember we have these different goals which are spoken of in the scriptures. We have artha, we have karma, we have pleasure, freedom from suffering. We have artha, we have freedom from poverty. We have economic development. We have dharma, which is religiosity and morality, free from immorality. And then finally we have moksha, freedom from this material world, right? And according to the Advaitin, that liberation means freedom from ignorance, totally freedom from ignorance. And that ignorance is that we think that there's differentiation and that we are different from God and the world, and we're all one. Okay, that's the freedom from ignorance that he wants. So here we're going to explain that in a little bit more detail. Purushartha, or the supreme goal of life in Advaita Vedanta. So the reason for going through all of this understanding of Advaita is so that we can understand Ramanuja's arguments against Advaita. First of all, we have to understand what the Advaitins are saying. Then we can understand the fallacies. Already we've seen so many fallacies and so many problems with their arguments. Just by going through them logically, they make a lot of it doesn't make a lot of sense. But we'll find Ramanuja has got specific reasons why he says the Advaitin is incorrect. So every system of Hindu philosophy which is religious has to answer the question, what is the ultimate aim or supreme goal of life? The great majority of us go on living without this thought ever rising in our minds. But the moment we begin to think and to feel that we should not drift like logs on the sea without any aim or object, this question will ask for a reply. Since Advaita considers that we, the jivas, the souls, the individual souls, are really Brahman, Nirguna Brahman, but that we have, owing to beginningless ignorance or avidya, fallen into this current situation of births and deaths, subject to the suffering of samsara, which is repeated birth and death and rebirth, right? It would follow that the supreme goal, or the Purushartha, would be, according to Advaita, to get rid of this avidya, or this knowledge, this ignorance, which has been the cause of our identifying ourselves with this body and mind, both gross and subtle, right? And to realize that we have all along been and are really Brahman. And again, he gives this Upanishadic statement here, Aham Brahmasmi. What does it really mean? So Aham Brahmasmi means literally, I am Brahman. So we want to realize that. The Advaitin wants to realize that. How does he go about realizing that? And what does it mean to realize that? So in the Upanishads, however, there are some passages where the soul or the self is said to be led along a luminous path called the Achiradi Marga. Here it says just Achiradi, but Marga means path. Okay, so the Achiradi path means the path of light. right? And this is in some of the Upanishads, it mentions this, that when the soul achieves liberation, when the soul achieves mukti or moksha, right? The soul, after leaving this body, goes along this achiradi marga, this light, this path of light. What does that mean, actually? Path of light, right? So by Amanava Purusha to Brahman, where it enjoys perfect bliss. So the Advaitin explains away these passages as describing a lower form of liberation, of mukti, or release from bondage, where the self, which has been meditating on Saguna Brahman, right, Ishvara, or Brahman with attributes, reaches the region of Saguna Brahman. So the Advaitin, he might even talk about Vaikuntha or Goloka. He might talk about the supreme heaven, and he might say, by worshiping, Krishna or Vishnu, you might attain this heaven. But this, to the Advaitin, is a lower type of liberation. It's not the pure ultimate liberation of oneness. So to such souls, there is no coming back to samsara, right? But it is not the final state of mukti or liberation, according to the Advaitin. It is what Advaitins call krama mukti. Krama means step. It's a step. It's a step, and you don't come back to this material consciousness. You go to that step, and then you continue. You have to continue to get ultimate liberation. So it's not really liberation. Just like we talked about in the Advaitins' belief, for practical purposes, there'll be God, and there'll be the world, and there'll be the universe and the souls, and there'll be bhakti, and there'll be shastras, and there'll be Vedas, and there'll be karma yoga and jnana yoga and bhakti yoga, and all these things will be there for practical reasons. And after following all those things, somebody may come to a type of liberation, but it's this first type of liberation called krama mukti, which they talk about, which is only a stepping stone. It's a step. It's on the ladder. And the ultimate step, the top step, is actually nirguna, the understanding of nirguna Brahman, that everything is one. So still there's differentiation in this form of mukti, according to the Advaitins. There is yet another step to be taken by the self or soul, which it will realize as a result of jnana or knowledge, and that is the pure consciousness of Brahman. This alone is real liberation. So that's what the Advaitins say. So that's their idea of the Purushartha, of the ultimate. Because he had to say this, because you may talk to some Advaitins, you may find some Advaitins talking about, okay, Vaikuntha, Goloka, heaven, Swarga. You can, if you follow these different processes given in the scriptures and you worship this deity, you will attain that deity's place and everything like that. And the Advaitins may say that, yes, we can do that, but that is only krama mukti for them. It is not full liberation. It is not real liberation. It is not the highest form of liberation. It is not actually liberation, right, in the ultimate sense for them. No, it's not real mukti. They don't accept. If you're asking whether krama mukti is real mukti, no, it's not real mukti. It's just a step towards mukti, according to them, like that. Because real liberation means complete giving up of complete ignorance. And when all ignorance is given up, when all maya is dissolved, there is nothing but one Brahman. There is no Vaikuntha, there is no Goloka, there is nothing. There's only Brahman, according to the Advaitin. Right. So what are the means? Now, remember, we said there's tattva and there's purushartha, but there's also hita. Hita means what is the means, or the upaya. The means is upaya means means. Hita means also means. The means of attaining mukti or liberation, according to Advaita. Right. What is the sadhana? What is the actual practice that we do to attain that stage? Right. Either the krama stage or the final stage of liberation, the paramartika. Moksha or liberation, the ultimate highest stage of liberation or oneness with Brahman. How do we attain that, according to Advaita? Since Advaita teaches that the bondage of samsara is due to ignorance or avidya, and the only means by which avidya, the cause of bondage, could disappear is jnana or knowledge, right? The Shastra or Shruti, the Upanishads, the Vedanta teaches this knowledge by which the self understands that in reality it is Brahman, Tattvamasi, that thou art, right? That you are, right? The knowledge of the identity of Jiva with Brahman is the only means by which the ignorance or avidya could be gotten rid of. The Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, describes 3 ways or yogas to be followed by the seeker after salvation or mukti or liberation, right? So remember that all of the different Vedantic acharyas who follow the different sampradayas, they all have commentaries on the Prasthanatraya, the 3 basic texts, and those 3 texts are, first of all, the Upanishads. Secondly, the systematized version of the knowledge of the Upanishads in the Brahma Sutras or Vedanta Sutras. And then finally, the Bhagavad Gita, which is Smriti, not Shruti, but which also gives us the ways, the best reference point for the ways of attaining liberation. So here he's talking about what's in the Gita. The Gita describes 3 ways or yogas to be followed by the seeker after salvation or mukti. So if you want liberation, the Gita is giving you some ways. So one of them is karma yoga. So karma yoga, the performance of rites and duties pertaining to man's station in life in his varna and ashrama, right? So there's a system of a social system amongst the Hindus and the Vaishnavas, which has been followed in different ways in different parts of India. It's slightly different, like that, but it basically divides society into 4 classes and 4 stages of life. And according to that, all these different classes and stages of life, the mixtures, they all have different duties to perform in society, and then society runs very nicely. And then one progresses life after life through this type of society until one comes to the state of liberation. So there are different rituals and different karmas, different sacrifices and different types of worship and things that people do in these different varnas and ashramas in order to attain, in order to go forward in that procession towards liberation. Okay, so that is called karma yoga. So one of them is called karma yoga. The performance of the rights and duties pertaining to man's station in life, his varna and his ashrama, right, his class and his stage of life, in a spirit of complete detachment. So doing those things with complete detachment, not expecting the fruits, right, without any thought of their consequence or fruits. So that is what karma yoga is. Otherwise, it's just karma without yoga. Yoga is meant, when we say yoga means to unite. What it means is to unite the individual soul with the supreme soul, right? So Advaitins believe that means it's a method to bring us into being one with Nirguna Brahman. Everybody else says that yoga means to come in contact with the supreme soul or to serve the supreme soul, like that, which is the natural position according to the non-Advaitins, the people who are not monists, but who are more dualistic, right? And who see difference and who see differentiation as being real, understand that the soul and the universe and God is all real. Those people say that yoga means attaining a type of personal liberation. So here we're talking about impersonal liberation. The Advaitin wants to attain impersonal liberation by performing karmas, but he does it but Bhagavad Gita just doesn't say to perform karmas. It says to perform karma yoga. So karma yoga means to perform your karmas without the idea of getting the result from that. That is called nishkama karma. Nishkama means, kama means desire. So nishkama means without desire or desireless karma works. So doing those works without desire for the fruit. So if you do that, that is on the stepping stone away from attaining to moksha. So the rites and duties are to be performed as forms of worship to the Lord. Saguna Brahman, again, that lower form according to the Advaitins of Brahman, that actually has different is differentiated and has different attributes and qualities, right? And we worship him, of course, because what would be the worship of Nirguna Brahman? We're Nirguna Brahman, according to the Advaitins. God is also Nirguna Brahman. The world is also Nirguna Brahman. Everything's Nirguna Brahman. So how would we worship it? If we had pure knowledge of Nirguna Brahman, of oneness, how could we worship anything? Because we are everything. So it's only possible, karma yoga is only possible in this vyavaharika reality, this lower reality of the Advaitins. It's not possible in the paramarthika reality, right? So it's a stepping stone, a way to get to krama mukti, and ultimately, which is a stepping stone itself to ultimate reality, ultimate liberation. So the Gita also teaches a second way, and that is bhakti yoga. So here, very interestingly, the Advaitin says the first way is karma yoga. The second way is bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga, which consists of devotion, adoration, meditation, upasana, worship of the Lord, of this Saguna Brahman, right, of God. The third way is jnana yoga. So we've talked about karma yoga, jnana yoga. Karma yoga, bhakti yoga, and now we'll talk about jnana yoga. The third way is jnana yoga, or the way of knowledge, or jnana. And the jnani, the person, the knower, the person who's in knowledge, is praised highly in several passages in the Gita. For example, Krishna says there are 4 types of people who turn towards me, right? So there's arto jigyasa, artati jnani cha, right? He says that there's the arto, jigyasu, there's somebody who's inquisitive, jigyasu, there's somebody who wants freedom from suffering. There's somebody who is in artarti, who's in search of wealth, right? So there's these sort of people, and they can perform these other karma yogas and bhakti yogas. But then there's the jnani, there's the person who simply wants to know me in truth, who wants to know Saguna Brahman Krishna in truth, like that. And that will ultimately lead to what? To krama mukti. And if he knows completely Vedanta philosophy in truth, it will ultimately lead to nirguna moksha, right? It'll lead to impersonal liberation. Okay, so the jnani, and then in the next verse, in the 7th chapter, Krishna says, of all of these 4, the jnani, I consider the jnani to be the best. So Shankara and these other Advaitins, they say, look, jnana is the best. Jnana is the best. So jnana yoga is the best. So because the ultimate is not to perform the works, right? The ultimate is not to perform the puja and the devotion or the meditation, because all of those things are based on vyavaharika, or a lower form of understanding, of which understands differentiation. But only the jnana is the most important, because that actually leads to krama mukti and to ultimate liberation, right? So the Advaitin holds that the direct means, or sadhana, that leads directly and at once to liberation is only jnana. So although Lord Krishna, right, teaches karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga in the Bhagavad Gita, the Advaitins say jnana yoga is more important than karma and bhakti, right? Because it directly leads to moksha, whereas those others only give some stepping stones towards krama mukti, but you can directly go to nirguna paramarthika moksha by jnana. So in support of his view, right, the Advaitin, or we can say Shankaracharya, cites the authority of several passages in the Upanishads to back up the view that jnana yoga is the best method given in the Gita, right, to liberation, such as following. He who knows Brahman becomes Brahman. So the Upanishad says he who knows Brahman becomes Brahman. So what's more important, devotion, works, or knowing? Knowing is important. Knowledge is important, therefore, because it says so in the Upanishads. So if we simply read the Bhagavad Gita by itself, we might think, oh, okay, karma yoga, there's jnana yoga, there's bhakti yoga. Even we might understand something about property, about in the very last final statement by Lord Krishna, sarvadhamam parityaja, abandon all varieties of religion, just surrender to me. So we might even understand that. But then who is to say which of those things is the best thing? if we compare it, therefore, to the Upanishads, and we look in the Upanishads, so Shankara is saying, look, in the Upanishads it says, he who knows Brahman becomes Brahman. Aha. So knowing is more important, The Advaitins will say knowing is more important than Karma Yoga. Jnana Yoga is more important than Karma Yoga, more important than Bhakti Yoga, maybe more important even than property, because property, what is property? All of these other forms, all these other sadhanas, all these other ways or means, right, are dependent upon some idea of differentiation ultimately. But so they may be okay as a stepping stone from the Vyavaharika level to Krama Mukti, to the intermediate type of liberation, but they're not going to take you. They're not going to take you to the ultimate liberation. But knowledge, pure knowledge of the scriptures, of undifferentiated Brahman, Nirguna Brahman, that will take us to the highest. That's what the Advaitin says. Okay. So he's enamored, the Advaitin, of Jnana Yoga. This is very important for him, more important than these other ways. So the performance of karma in a spirit of utter detachment is, of course, ordained, but it can at best create only a desire for attaining true knowledge of Brahman. So he's saying, well, what is karma yoga used for anyway? Karma yoga is we get to do these different acts, and finally that's supposed to bring us to the point of thinking, oh, I should try to get supreme knowledge. So it's supposed to create a desire for knowledge of attaining true devotion. True knowledge of attaining true knowledge of Brahman, right? Nirguna Brahman, only a desire by causing mental purity. So karma yoga, he says, causes mental purity, and the mental purity will help us to have that desire for true knowledge. So that is called chitta shuddhi. Chitta shuddhi. Chitta means consciousness or intelligence, right? Or mental faculties, and shuddhi means purification. So pure mentality. Having a pure mentality, we will try to attain pure knowledge. So devotion and adoration, so that was the result of karma yoga. The result of bhakti yoga, devotion and adoration and meditation, upasana, worship, or what is called bhakti yoga, is concerned only with Saguna Brahman, right? Because you can't worship Nirguna Brahman. How are you going to worship Nirguna Brahman? He has no qualities, right? Saguna Brahman, you can worship him, right? And its fruition, the fruit of bhakti yoga will result only in krama mukti, right? Which is only a stepping stone to the ultimate liberation, or sojourn in the world of Saguna Brahman, either Vaikuntha, Goloka, or some people who worship Shiva, they'll go to Kailasha or whatever it is. It'll be the temporary illusory world of Saguna Brahman, according to the Advaitin, right? So this is only a stepping stone to ultimate liberation. So therefore, thereafter, attaining true knowledge of the identity of the self with Brahman, the self will realize that it is all along been and is in reality Brahman. It is in reality Nirguna Brahman. Thus, in the Advaitic system, only jnana yoga is the means to mukti. The jnani might give up the performance of the rites and duties ordained in the scripture, as he no longer needs these props. So these things like worship, meditation, bhakti yoga or karma yoga, different sacrifices, samskaras, all these different things can be given up by the Advaitin, right? And that is what he understands by Lord Krishna. When Lord Krishna says sarvadharmam parityaja, he means give up all acts, give all action up, give up all actions. So sannyasi cha yogi cha nani ragnina chakriya. A sannyasi or a yogi, a person who's actually surrendered, and a person who's actually in search of union with the Supreme, a yogi. Those people, they light no fire and perform no work. They don't do anything. So all of these pujas, all of these meditations, all of these sacrifices, this karma yoga, jnana yoga, karma yoga, not jnana yoga, karma yoga and bhakti yoga, all of these activities of these things, or even if we say property, surrender, these are all to be given up, right? Only jnana is important. Only knowledge is important. the Jnani might give up the performance of all these rites, ordained institutions. Of course, there are many Advaitins, they don't give up those things. They do those things as well, because they understand not everybody is of the mentality to give up all those things, but they want to do those things only as an example to other people, to try to get them up to the stage of understanding that those things should be given up. And so for the Advaitin, sannyas is the most important thing. Take sannyas and simply study the scriptures, study the Upanishads. Jnana yoga is the way to ultimate liberation.
Om Namo Narayana.